I think there are probably lots of things going on as usual underneath the numbers. So we all know that in the business environment of today, there are a lot of challenges that all companies are facing across all sectors. They vary by sector, but clearly there's huge cost pressures. There's big retention challenges in terms of how people hold on to their key people, how people recruit new people, and so on. And all of those can play a role in driving how companies feel about whether the time is now to change their payroll provider or any other key supplier. And I feel that right now we're seeing probably a return to some of the levels of activity that we saw before the pandemic, just in terms of people having the headspace to think about, right, we haven't looked at a key system for a while. We've got changing expectations from our employees in terms of the degree of digitalization they expect in their experiences. We've got new capabilities in the market. People will be looking at the productivity of the teams within their own businesses and putting all that together, and potentially with a bit more space, although hold that thought, to think about these things. They might then be thinking, right, now's the time where I want to have a look at what my current supplier provides, what else is available on the market, and whether now is a good time to move. But I also feel in times of change, because we haven't obviously settled down into a period of kind of normality, because on the heels of the pandemic, obviously, now is inflation and all the causes of that everyone understands, and the impacts that has on both consumers and on companies. And that puts a new lens, I think, on change in two respects. So one, people are looking at their costs very closely, and that's understandable. But two, companies themselves are going through a lot of change, and we're seeing a lot of examples of companies that are either buying other companies or restructuring themselves, or maybe being sold. And those can create key moments as well for businesses to look at some of their core suppliers and go, right, if we're starting a new chapter, maybe as part of a larger organization or maybe separate to the previous organization that we were part of, what arrangements do we want to make? So we're seeing quite a lot of that kind of activity at the moment as well. I think the last thing I'd say, and I mentioned it earlier, is that employees' expectations have just really changed. And again, we all know this from our own personal experiences through the pandemic, but if anything, the level of expectation just continues to rise. It's not like it stepped up during the pandemic and has stayed flat. Everybody expects that the experience they get from whatever digital provider it is, whether it's in our consumer lives or in our work lives, reaches a certain standard. And I think organizations that are not able to provide that standard for their employees over time, and it's not a sort of a moment in time thing, but over time will notice that it is harder to attract and retain good talent, because people are getting used to a really high standard of payroll and HR experience from a range of providers in a range of employers. And if they move somewhere where they have to take a big step back, then that's something that people will feel. And we feel that that's a big driver for people looking at, yes, they maybe want to look at their productivity, yes, maybe they want to look at their costs, maybe they want to look at some of their internal processes, but employees and how to attract and retain really, really good people, whatever sector your company is in and whatever the kind of skill set that you're seeking to attract, it's relevant across the whole job market, and we consistently get that feedback. The very last point I'd make is that increasingly people expect different business systems to talk to each other. And again, whilst we all know that's not necessarily a simple on-off switch, when it's achieved, it makes life so much simpler, and it is steadily getting easier to achieve. So the two very common systems that people talk about linking at payroll and HR, but clearly you could just as fittingly talk about the links out into finance systems. And then within HR, it's obviously a broad church. You could have workforce management software, you could have recruitment software, you could have performance management software, learning software. Not all businesses need all of these modules, but if you need some of those modules, particularly the modules that are very closely related to pay, like time and attendance or workforce management, then the benefit to your company of linking these systems together so that the workflow is automated, the data moves automatically, it's really compelling once you get it set up properly, and not all systems can do that. And if you're in a business looking for a step change in productivity, that is one lever that you can pull, but don't underestimate the level of change involved to get that right and make that happen, because it will take a lot of work both from your suppliers and your internal teams to make that transition and make it work properly. So I think a range of factors, and as we're all used to, there's not enough stability probably for many of us in our business lives, just like our in our lives as consumers, but none of us can change that. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of companies making decisions to make changes, hopefully for the better.